Today, we will be discussing web-based social cognition and how we perceive others of different cultures. First, let's break down social cognition, the strategies we use to become aware of the social world around us, and how those strategies differ using web-based communication. Social cognition is the process of perceiving others and the cognitive strategies we use for understanding our broader social world. Though the tactics we use may differ, social perceptions of others are made, whether face to face or over an internet forum. But what do we use these perceptions for? Imagine you're taking a class on campus. You're new to the area and you're lost. To the left, you see a group of people from a different culture, smiling and talking about a play they recently saw. On the right, a single person from your own culture with a negative posture and a scowl on their face. Who do you ask for directions from? Instinctually, we tend to stick with people of our own culture because, let's face it, large groups are scary. We scrutinize whether someone is happy, mad, affectionate, or distant in what psychologists call the warm-cold variable. We then conclude that if someone is happy, they must possess other good traits, and vice versa for negative characteristics. However, in our current socialistic, technology-based society, we are limited in our ability to make decisions about others based on personality traits. Because social media-based relationships do not allow us to evaluate body language and verbal cues, we are forced to evaluate traits such as literary competency, the warmth of words, facial expressions, and physical attractiveness. No wonder we often misunderstand and form incorrect perceptions of people in an internet-based forum. Therefore, if we know social cognition is how we perceive others, then the World Wide Web does not change that fact, but rather it differs in the cognitive strategies we use to evaluate and form judgments about one's character. With the knowledge of how we form impressions of others in social situations, let's look at what shapes the tools we use to make those perceptions. We all see the world through a specific lens that allows us to evaluate behaviors and form opinions of others. We gather together groups of cultural norms and social codes that we learn from an early age and engage in the one universal structure that forms social connection, which is communication. Whether verbal, nonverbal, face-to-face, or over the World Wide Web, we adopt the behaviors of our society and subconsciously compare them to those of another. During social interactions, we evaluate our own behaviors with the feedback received from others, which then affects our relational responses, behaviors, and choices. For example, my wife is an intensive care nurse at a busy inner-city hospital. She has shared with me her observation of cultural differences in the family units of her patients. The Russian and Hispanic families of the patients she cares for typically do not leave the side of their loved one, whereas the Caucasian families tend to come and go. On one hand, she may feel judged and frustrated trying to focus on her patient care and having to explain herself constantly, while on the other hand feeling angry that no one other than herself cares about the well-being of her patient. Due to these experiences, my wife has formed social perceptions around different cultures and to what level each one values family. While it may be natural to form judgment about others, our perceptions vary across cultures. Our culture shapes the way we see the world around us, creating a society of like-minded people that share the same beliefs, ethics, and the way we interact with one another. Since no single culture is exactly the same, then our perception of others is a comparison of our collective experiences. In Russian or Asian cultures, for example, They tend to be interdependent or group-minded, while people from the US are more independent or self-minded. Though one is not more superior to the other, these attributes adjust our social perceptions of that culture. We should be reminded that God loves his children equally, and it is not our job to make judgments of another. In the words of Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 2, it states, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others." In summary, if we can revise our thinking and adapt the behaviors of the diverse communities around us, we can bring together the best of many civilizations and experience multicultural benefits. We are merely a melting pot of diverse people evaluating the world through cultural glasses, while attempting to integrate ourselves into a social society. All humans have the need to feel connected, and we seek that connection through relationships. The difference is how people across cultures socially interact and form bonds. Russians, for example, are typically more reserved and serious, building trust first before considering someone a friend. Whereas Americans are more outspoken and animated, befriending others before they begin building trust within the social bond. In contrast, Americans weave in and out of relationships easily, and Russians remain in closely connected friendships. This is no surprise considering the vast use of social media in America and the fact that Americans are largely independent people. With Russians being interdependent people or reliant on the community, they lack personal space. In fact, space is considered rude and unfriendly. They tend to sit and walk very closely with one another, which Americans consider to be uncomfortable and an invasion of space. People in the Western world tend to back away from someone who is less than 3 to 4 feet from them, while Russians communicate less than 1 to 2 feet from each other. Russians also date only to find a mate and marry, whereas Americans date casually and often with multiple partners. This is not shocking, however, given the independent tendencies of the American people. One thing that surprised me was that Russians consider personal questions a sign of disrespect. This is so foreign to Western culture, where we are socially informal and often debate and discuss personal and non-personal issues. But the most surprising cultural difference between American and Russian social norms is that Americans overuse the phrases "I'm sorry" and "thank you." Russian people apologize only once because they believe repetition in speech makes one appear untrustworthy. My perspectives about the Russian culture, though originally biased, have now changed. My perception was limited due to the lack of social interaction with Russian people. Bounded rationality caused me to create satisfiers in my perceptions of others. With the information received and the time spent researching another community of people, I have a better understanding of cultural differences. By gaining knowledge, we are informing our social cognition, giving us more accurate perceptions, which gives us the ability to better assess social situations.